Hi, everybody. Welcome to Gathering of the Minds.
Thank you, and with that, we go to the Q&A.
All right, so you want to do like 3 more?
Yeah, let's do 3 more. Lewis, you're up.
Yeah, sure. So it seems pretty obvious to me that we're on the cusp of a meme revolution and thus a meme war. So this question is for Mr. Pinchbeck and Styx specifically. I would like you to talk a little bit about how memetics, censorship, and the occult form our reality today, and how that's going to play out, or how that might play out in the coming years.
Styx, you want to hit that one first?
Sure. I would say that the occult melds with human psychology and with propaganda. The meme war never ended. It began and has been ongoing. It's just there was a lull there for a while because I think the establishment looked at what was happening, realized how quickly things were moving, got so confused it didn't even bother to respond right away. They were sweating bullets. They had to regroup before they could formulate a strategy. But propaganda is very much in implementation right now by corporations, by political powers. And it's on both ends. There are those that attempt to employ these things in order to perpetuate freedom, maybe rip apart the old establishment because we're like, well, they start wars and do crazy things. So, we're tired of that now. And then there are people on the other side. They're like, no, we've built this multi-billion-dollar corporate empire. We can't let it get pissed away. So we have to do something about this. Memetics, in the strictest sense, is, as far as spiritual memetics go, is the hijacking of the reasoning mechanisms of a person's brain. Thus, you can cause strange associations within their mind between things that are technically not related. You can certainly, there are all sorts of techniques you can use. I made a post on Minds about this, I think 2 days ago. There are all sorts of things that are done by corporations, rendering people to the one-dimensional. For instance, they would say that a person is irredeemable or deplorable, you might say. And so you can simply forsake their arguments. Any other thing that they say, even if it's totally sensible and sane, it no longer matters because you've given them a one-dimensional moniker. Well, it's propaganda. It can be done in a spiritual manner too. Literally, the most obvious example was Kek. Now, I've seen write-ups about Kek. Think about this. We have this ancient Egyptian frog god being unironically referenced in mainstream publications at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and by people who are heavy-hitting career politicians whose decades might be spanned in terms of their political careers. They are unironically referencing these things. They unironically use the term meme, even if they don't really understand what it means. They talk about Pepe and a million other things. You've got them being listed as like hate symbols and all sorts of other things under the sun. Could we possibly have imagined, prior to the rise of the kind of grassroots talk we get on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet, could we possibly have imagined an election like the last one and the things surrounding it, which is now metastasized? It's gone far beyond the US to basically every corner of the world. And it's becoming a mainstream mode of human communication. The use of a symbol or a picture, a cartoon, something funny to encapsulate an idea or something along those lines is very, very common now. It wasn't really that common even a few years beforehand.
The cult is not necessarily negative, right? That a cult means hidden. And, I'm personally, from having explored shamanism and psychedelics and other types of stuff, I do believe in the occult. I believe there are these hidden dimensions that influence our human reality and work through it in different ways. And there are more positive ones and more negative ones. And they operate through a language of symbols and sometimes secret societies and so on. So I do think there's a level where that's all taking place. I'm not quite sure what else you're interested in.
I guess just talking more about what are those systems at play and how do they affect the reality that we're all living in, this whole censorship debate, like the manipulation of information, trying to get the truth out. How do these symbols, how does this occult paradigm or the hidden knowledge play into all of this?
Well, the occult has always propped up the concept of liberty. In the strictest sense, you have to be at liberty to even study the spiritual. The concept of the old very hierarchical orders of organized religion is something the occult tends to oppose. Symbolism used in the realm of propaganda on a spiritual level has begun to mesh, I think, with politics and society in general. You see the return of neo-paganism in the wake of sort of the 1980s and 1990s has now been directly influenced by the internet as well. The meshing together is partially literary. Of course, as I stated before, in the first segments, the availability of the spiritual goes hand in hand with the availability, especially of books, because when you're talking about spiritual lore up until basically the 90s, it's all in print. A lot of those are rare, privately printed, very ancient, and so they've been released to the general public. We are seeing a renaissance within the occult that's very much like the occult renaissance we had maybe in the early 1900s as radio and early wave electrical sort of things spread around. There's more printing going on. Psychology, science, politics, all of these things at that time were meshed with the spiritual too. Now we've seen the good and bad side of this. For every bit of Atlantean lore where some group of people decides, well, we're going to be very positive, we're going to grow things, eat organic, we're going to be green hedge witches or something. For every group that's like that, you also have a group that might be tinged by actual extremism, actual violence. They may say, well, they may become a doomsday cult. They may become spiritual fanatics under the banner of some political system. I think that's something we have to look out for. But generally speaking, those that are making the memes are not, you've been told probably, well, it's Russia. It's state actors or their cohorts doing this. That's not my experience. My experience, at least in my opinion, based on what I've seen, it's primarily grassroots. And it's primarily meant for benevolent, I think, purposes.
Yeah, but I guess I would hope that in the future, the focus of human society turns away from wealth or material accumulation more towards inner development, occult development, which is what somebody like Rudolf Steiner talked about and explored in anthroposophy. I mean, I think we have a lot of latent capacities, psychic abilities, energy forces like chi and kundalini that, we could have like schools, training grounds where these become a part of our basic, human rights in a way to explore our inner resources beyond what we now even imagine is possible. My own experience suggests a lot more is possible than we now know or we now accept. And yeah, beyond that, yeah, there is, negative, I believe negative occult forces, operating through, masonry, skull and bones, all that kind of stuff. I think that's one level. But I don't really see it as conspiratorial so much. I feel it's like it's like a co-creation. Like the human psyche kind of co-creates with these like astral or natural realms in some sense. But we have to become more, consciously aware of our co-creations, our projections.
I want to also ask if there is any thoughts on Moloch, who in the internet is considered to be the arch enemy of Ket, depicted as a bull that the frog god fights with. There are these theories about how the elite worship Moloch and he's this entity that they give children to and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just curious, Daniel, in your experiences, have you encountered, especially after the synthetic DMT trip that you had, these kinds of entities?
Hold on a second. Hey, Ian, you're taking I'll get you a drink and we can wait like 10 minutes. What's that?
What was your experience after the synthetic DMT trip when it comes to all these demonic forces? And do you see something like Moloch, which was a Canaanite entity back in the day, still being talked about today as being particularly relevant in such a way as the darkness that we have to overcome when we go into the light?
Yeah, that sort of takes us like off topic. I think I'm gonna pass on that one for now. We're talking about the person.
No problem, thank you.
I would just quickly add, there is a bull just downtown on Wall Street, and they did recently give the bull a child statue. So, take that however you want.
All right, next question from the gentleman over here.
Yeah, thank you. My question is for Bill specifically and for Minds. First of all, I'm a fan of your work and I really like the Minds platform as a user. And I feel like creating a network for the people, by the people is hard. And I see that you guys are trying to do that by having features like, for example, I can not only boost a post that I made, first of all, using credits that I've gained from sharing my content, so I'm getting paid for that, which is great. But I can boost the post also that you made if I believe in the cause, the organization, or an idea that you put out there, right? Which kind of suggests that, Minds as a platform is believing in humanity and consciousness at the same time, and trusting that probability is that out of 2 million users that Minds has, majority of them would support the right causes, the right ideas, and believe the right news, and support that. I just wanted to know if there's any way you are, as a platform, are monitoring the morality and the accuracy of content that's being mostly boosted or sponsored or seen by the users.
I think providing more tools for the community to make decisions on what's true. And I think the metrics on the post do show a degree of what people think. But I actually do agree with the ability for the community to kind of help label content and provide primary sources, provide peer review, try to understand what is true and what's not. But I mean, honestly, right now we have pretty limited resources for going through and verifying content. And even Tim's been going into this with some of his videos, like with what is true and what like there is truth. I think we think that. So, but also getting into content is a little bit of a luxury that we haven't really had the ability to do yet. So, I mean, I think definitely in the future, helping people become educated more to understand what's true, and maybe some sort of metrics around the post to help disclose what the community thinks. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those metrics should be there. Especially, I know it's difficult to judge morality because it's personal. You can judge accuracy for sure. You can make sure that content that's not accurate is not being pushed out like fake news, etc. But morality is everyone has their own morals, and you cannot be like, okay, this content cannot be here because I feel it's immoral. That's a good one person.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
you can definitely take a collective vote on that for sure. If there's a way to do that.
But even accuracy for fake news is very difficult.
Yeah, but it can be cross-checked, so it can be out there.
The knife media, I've been talking about them recently because they've done some really good work where they actually, they say that they're putting the scientific method into tracking news stories for bias and slant. But I mean, even when you have very large news organizations that you want to trust, they get things wrong too. So, there's been a string of really bad reporting from like ABC, CNN, and now the AP. And if the biggest news outlets are, get big stories wrong, we'll never know for sure.
All right, I think we should wrap it up.
There is one last gentleman there with a question, and that's it. No more questions after that gentleman.
Let's do it.
There's a guy who's running for Congress, Paul Newman, who is campaigning on proposing anti-censorship legislation. I just wanted to know what you thought of that.
Sure, hang on. I don't know.
Where do we
exactly what
donate?
he's talking about.
His name is Paul Newman. He's running for Congress in Wisconsin. He's proposing anti-censorship legislation, so I just wanted to know what you thought of that.
I would wanna know what that
Yeah, specifically
entails.
what it says.
Yeah, like what,
I guess just using the government to enforce the First Amendment. And all other questions.
I mean,
So just to kind of add to this a little bit, we're all moaning about YouTube, Facebook, Google. I mean, these are centralized platforms that exist, and we don't have to use them. So, you can watch a video, you can send me a video. You don't have to use YouTube to do that. But we do need the internet to be able to share that. And the internet, since really its inception, has been a platform that is totally free. You can do whatever you want. And that's mainly by net neutrality and other things like that. Net neutrality is being pretty much broken apart in the last few months. So net neutrality really was protecting what you were asking. So you don't need a censorship law because you can make a website like Minds. Disclaimer, I do work for Minds. But yeah, people can do that, and you can make a website. But now with net neutrality being, bashed away, you're gonna not be able to make these websites.
Be very careful what passes for net neutrality, especially Title II changes that when you consider or treat the internet as a utility, which can be therefore subject to licensing. So it's a great concept, but remember, whenever the government gives you a great sounding thing, No Child Left Behind, Affordable Care Act, military, whatever.
But it's the idea behind, not looking at the packets, not seeing where it's going to. It's basically like sending a letter in the post. The mail is not reading that. They're not looking at, what's in your package that they're sending to someone because they don't like what's in it. And that's really what legislation should be about, to protect it. And similar platforms such as, if you have an iPhone, there's no way you can get any apps on your phone without being approved by Apple. So really, that's a big problem. Android's fine, you can get apps from elsewhere.
You can jailbreak your
Apple-
phone.
Sorry?
You can jailbreak an iPhone.
You can, but most people don't know how to do that. So it should be easy for people to do that. So
What about the Internet Bill of Rights? Do we talk about that or no? We can end on that because that seems to be a pretty good idea. I know. What do you think, Six?
Sorry there, my thing wasn't appearing for a moment. I support the concept of an Internet Bill of Rights. It should simply be this. Because sites work with government entities, whether they're domestic or foreign, they should be explicitly constrained by the First and Fourth Amendments. It's really that simple. Again, it's more about pragmatism than it is actual legalese. I understand the fact that there's no constitutional prohibition on a company kicking someone off their platform for breaking some obscure TOS. They can make that whatever they want, but do we want a society like that? I would say, as far as Nealon goes, I haven't looked at the specific legislation. If it does just that and says, well, websites can't censor, merely harmful material, it has to be specifically criminal under U.S. law. Yes, it's something I would basically support, but I'll say it this way.
Hold on, Six, I gotta stop you. I'm sorry, isn't Nealon like a really racist, anti-Semite
Yeah.
guy on Twitter?
Nealon definitely has out there beliefs, but insofar as he's just proposing that, it doesn't matter who's proposing it. If it is fundamentally a good idea, we've got to get past the point at which we give into the one-dimensionality, which I previously spoke of. We can't just say, well, that person's a kook or that person's racist in some way, and so any idea they happen to make has to be part of that one-dimensional caricature. A person can have a very skilled person might be totally flawed in their personal life. A person who's basically a saint might be totally inept. We have to get past that. But yes, I would generally support the basic idea, but maybe it should be limited by market cap. For instance, like a site that has become quasi-monopolistic, instead of trying to break it apart, which the government never has the balls to do anyway, they're never going to apply anti-monopoly laws to any meaningful degree online. Just make it so that a site that is above a certain cap is a de facto public utility without giving any of the legal precedent to the government to license anything. But I would point something else out with net neutrality. People who are really on board with preserving it don't seem to understand a domain registrar can abuse things the same way as an ISP. Why is it that the ISP should be restrained from throttling a site and the domain registrar shouldn't? You need that, or indexing sites, like Google's own search methodology. It is basically a monopoly. All the other search engines just use Google anyway and apply extra layers to it.
I just want to say too.
Wait, let Mark just. You good?
Well, because to a degree, I mean, you don't need to use DNS. DNS is the domain name services are basically services put in there for people to route things through. So I mean, you can make another one. You can set up your own that people point theirs to. You're just using a community there of DNS providers. You can use someone else, but with the internet, unless you're gonna put your own cables to every single person in the world, that's really kind of out of the question. So, the DNS isn't that, I mean, it should be protected as well. And so should the domain registrars and things like that. And to a degree they were until they were, given away a few years ago. Yeah, I think I kind of.
I think my personal challenge with it is you have to regulate basically every step of the way into a platform, right? So you're talking about DNS, the registrars. Basically, any company that supports you in any way has to be regulated because you know, what we saw with what happened with Gab or like the Daily Stormer, different companies through the pipeline have terms and conditions. So with, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Gab, but the domain registrar said, oh, you're violating hate speech by the social platform because of what users are saying, so they kick you off. An internet bill of rights wouldn't just be for specifically one company or the platform. It would have to regulate everything. And I think the challenge with that is if you try to place something, when you try to put a system in place that affects numerous systems, you're going to create a whole lot of bugs.
I think that's it.
It's big, we'll continue.
Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this.